call where the students who were reading the book got to speak to the author through Skype. And there was something really important about setting this up at these two schools that made it very different at each school. The most recent one was so smooth. There was no issue with getting access to Skype. All I had to do was work with the A+ performance coach, make sure she had Skype installed on her computer, and show her how easy it is to just initiate a Skype call. And that was it. And then she and I tested it remotely a couple of times just to make sure the connection was working fine. In the other instance, it took days of working with the campus technologist and placing multiple calls and emails to the district tech support to get it unblocked on one single computer on that campus. And if you know how campuses are networked, usually when you turn the computer off, when you turn it back on, it jumps IP addresses. So we had to work with that issue as well because we couldn't turn the computer off. We literally left the computer on, logged into Skype all night long. After we got it, it was like 6 in the evening when we finally got it connected and working right. And I literally was checking it like at midnight going, okay, is the Skype account still on through my phone? Because I was so nervous about it. But that highlights two really important issues that we have with technology. One, when we make it difficult to access, when we block tools, or when we say, okay, you have access to this tool, but you have to ask permission, and you have to tell us when you want to use it, and we'll unlock it on that machine. When we make it that difficult to use technology that's super, super simple, the grandparents of my children can turn on Skype and make it work. It's easy. When we make teachers jump through hurdles, that's where we end up with teachers who shut down and say, I don't want to learn any more technology. Don't bother me with these tools because they're too difficult to use. I need to concentrate on teaching. So we are creating some of the obstacles ourselves. The other thing it highlights is what many of us should already know about the landscape of educational technology in Houston. It's very uneven. We might live in an area that's coastal plain and very flat, but the landscape of our educational technology implementation, integration, and fusion in our schools is very uneven. The good news with that is that we do have some promising pilots that have been initiated in some of our districts. We also have pockets of innovation. Individual teachers who, despite the obstacles they're facing, despite pressures around testing or whatever they're facing on a day-to-day basis, lack of time, they're figuring out ways to innovate, do new things in their classroom, and provide these really meaningful, powerful learning experiences for their students. The bad news is those pockets of innovation, those promising pilots are too few and far between. For every single one of those, we have dozens of classrooms all over the area where if you walk in, the mode of instruction and the use of technology is so minimal, it looks almost like it did to me as a student 25 years ago in the classroom. One of the things that I started doing when I first started working for Houston A+ was to go out to our campuses, the ones that we work with, and assess this landscape. Where are we? Knowing where we need to be, where are we? And okay, let's start talking about steps to get where we need to be based on where we're at. And what I saw, there was a lot of technology in the schools, but it's primarily teacher-centered. I've come to define this as the standard classroom setup. The teacher workstation, the projector, the screen, probably a document camera as well that is, expensive document camera that's being used like an overhead projector. The technology is only in the teacher's hands. I've seen very few instances where kids had their hands on the equipment. If there's a smart board in the room, again, it's being used primarily for lecture. So it's teacher-centered use. Very, very little student-centered use of meaningful, powerful, connective technologies that open the world up to our students. And the reasons for this, there are lots of reasons, lots of individual reasons, but they fall under two categories. The first one is priorities. We just have not prioritized this enough. And the other is awareness. And those two are tied together. The lack of placing this as a priority comes from a lack of awareness. But it's a lack of awareness at all levels. So some of the things that we need to do individually, we need to raise our own awareness. We need to listen to people like Will and other educational thinkers out there who are exploring these possibilities and these new tools. And we need to coach our colleagues. Don't wait for someone else to do it, but work with our colleagues, our friends, learn with our students. And we need to take responsibility for building that awareness ourselves and not wait for someone else to do it. We also need, remember I mentioned that we have these promising pilots and these pockets of innovation. As a community across Houston, we need to do a much better job of highlighting those practices and sharing them. Not just across a district, from campus to campus, but from district to district. We need to get out, we need to learn from other districts, other campuses, the teachers that are doing this. And not just, oh, that's cool, how are you doing it, but also what lessons did you learn in doing that? If you tried one-to-one, did a one-to-one pilot, what did you learn in that process that will help me implement it better when I try it on my campus? Did you start a bring your own device policy on your campus where you're letting kids use their own devices in the classroom? If so, what are the lessons learned? Do you have procedures and policies in place that make that easier? Sharing, learning together. We just don't do a good enough job of that on this issue. And then finally, and I know if you're not in a leadership position to make these decisions, you may be thinking, that's great, but I can't do that. You still have a voice, and it's going to take collective voices and actions by calling and writing emails to support this to help our leadership understand the need for revisiting policies. We need to revisit device policies, and we need to revisit our filtering policies. You've all heard the if you give a person a fish, they'll eat for a day. If you teach them to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. Yeah, well, they also have to have access to the fishing pole, and the tackle box needs to be unlocked. And right now, the fishing poles are stored away somewhere, and the tackle boxes are locked in many, many cases. And then the other thing that we need to do is we need to stop waiting. We need to stop waiting for those policies to change. We need to stop waiting for test scores to improve. And I don't want to say we need to stop writing 5-year plans, but we need to change how we do that, because we write beautiful 5-year plans. We create these beautiful, wonderful 5-year plans and put them in a binder and say, this is what, this is our technology 5-year plan. But the reality is that 5-year plan does not matter to the 11th grader sitting in your classrooms right now. Because when you finally get around to implementing the end of that 5-year plan, that student is long gone. And so are hundreds of other students. So again, it comes down to awareness and priorities. So you're sitting here today building your awareness. And so thank you for being here. Before I introduce my friend Will, I want to make 3 requests of everybody in this room. The first request is suspend your disbelief, and when you start to hear the yes but bubble up in your head, suppress it, and instead allow yourself to think, what if? What if I started trying that on my own? Not necessarily in my classroom or my classrooms, but what if I just started trying to use that tool in my own work? The second request, well, let me rephrase that. No yes buts. Let's just hold off on the yes buts this morning. Okay. The second request is tied to that, and I'd like for you going forward to think of yourself as a learner first and an educator second. There's something really transformative that happens when you go about your daily work as a learner versus as the educator, the expert, leader, whatever the title is. When you're meeting with other teachers, when you're meeting with your students, reframe all of your work through the eyes of a learner. And what does that look like? What does that feel like? And how does that change the outcomes for you and for the other individuals that you're working with? And then finally, the last request that I have of you is when you leave here today, either today, tomorrow, sometime this week, do one new thing. It might be that you don't have to create a Twitter account, but just go to Twitter and there's a search box at the top of the screen. And in that search box, type in EdChat. It's all one word, E-D-C-H-A-T, EdChat, and do a search and see what comes up in those tweets. And then start clicking on some of the links that are listed there. or use a term related to your content area. So if you teach math and something you're currently focusing on, type that into the search box and see what people are tweeting, what resources other educators are tweeting out there. If you're in a leadership position, go to wikispaces.com, create a free wiki, and use, or even if a teacher, as a teacher you can do this, start a free wiki and invite your colleagues, your PLC, to work with you on that wiki to do collaborative lesson planning together through that wiki. Or through Google Docs. Maybe your school has a Google Docs account or Google Apps account and you haven't started using it yet. Go back to campus today, call your tech person and say, okay, come help me figure out this Google Apps account because I want to start using it to collaborate. So those are my 3 requests, and now I'd like to introduce to you someone who is a member of my personal learning network, my PLN, someone I consider a friend and a co-learner in this amazing journey that we're on. Will,